Welcome to Club 20's Water Committee meeting. Everybody, if you don't already know this, if you are a member of Club 20 and you are here, you are a member of the Water Committee. You may not be on the Water Committee's list, but you are encouraged to participate, to offer your thoughts and opinions, and to vote. When we get to I think only a single action item, but we do encourage participation throughout the meeting. If you are not a member, we can probably accommodate you right now to make sure that you are a voting member. Kimberly is standing there waving. If you are not a member now, and we're gonna get to membership in just a second. I want to begin, however, with introductions. I'd like to go all the way around the room as quickly as we can. My name is Treese. I am the chair of the Water Committee.
Reece, retired attorney from Vanden.
I'm Merritt Linke, Grand County Commissioner, Club 20 member.
Eric Rules, Mason County, Club 20.
Terry Lammer, San Miguel County. Joanne Snyder, Ranches.
Chris Holstrom, San Miguel County Commissioner.
Ray Beck, Moffett County Commissioner and membership chair for Club 20.
Don Cook, Moffett County Commissioner.
Jeff Comstock, Moffett County Natural Resources.
Callie Hendrickson, White River Douglas Creek Conservation Districts and Ag Committee Chair for Club 20.
Cindy Dozier, Hinsdale County, Chair-elect of Club 20.
Michael Murphy, Hinsdale County.
John Peters, County Commissioner for Uray County, sitting in for Vanden.
J. Paul Brown, Lapata County Sheepherder.
Arwin Jeffries, Zapata County, Agriculture.
Rachel Richards, Aiken County Commissioner, Secretary of Club 20.
Carlisle Courier, Mesa County Rancher.
Christian Reece, Executive Director of Club 20.
Nicole McCallum with Club 20 staff.
Kimberly Lindsay, Club 20 Membership Development Director.
Larry Cleaver, and I'm your host.
Sam Cesaris, I'm the current president of Colorado Water Congress.
Lois Dunn, Grand Junction Realtors.
Brian Reinhardt, Congressman Tippin's office.
I'm Ann McCoy Harold. I work for U.S. Senator Cory Gardner, and I'm a member emeritus of Club 20.
Kimberly Lindsay, Mike Passer.
Eric Carlson from Mesa County.
Nancy Shore, Mesa County.
Betty James from Montezuma County.
Eric James, Montezuma County.
Karen Harkin, Chapel, Grand Junction.
Doug Munger, Rock County Commissioner and rancher and board member on Chris's board on River District, and Upper Yakima Water Conservancy District as well.
Good afternoon, Joe Meyer, District Manager for BLM in Southwest Colorado.
Scott Armentrout, Forest Supervisor, Grand Mesa and Capagra Gunnison, 10 counties, and also Club 20 member.
I'm Kirk Russell from the Denver metro area. I'm with the State of Colorado, Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Clarice Tolby, Mesa County.
Tim Puff, Mesa County.
Kathy Well, Delta County, on the directors, not the whole company, you name it. G. Tucker, Delta County.
Joe Bertard, Ute Water.
D. Global, Westwater Engineering.
Steve Reichen, Ute Water.
I'm Keith McLaughlin with the Colorado Water and Power Authority.
Angelina Callaghan, Mesa County.
Joe Callaghan, Mesa County.
All right, thank you all and welcome. I appreciate you prioritizing Club 20 and the Water Committee for your day today, and appreciate the travels that many of you have made. As a reminder, for those of you, and announcement for those of you who weren't at the prior committee meeting, these meetings are being recorded now, so please use the microphones either in front of you at the tables or as Kimberly passes it around It will greatly facilitate both the record and the summaries that will be made of these meetings. Do we have anybody on the phone? Do we know this?
I don't have anybody on there right now.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, we do.
I'm
Good.
on.
Who is on the phone?
Ellen Roberts. Down
Ellen, Senator Roberts, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Anybody else that's on the phone? All right. Senator Roberts, we appreciate you calling in. We may have others calling in. As a reminder for Senator Roberts, if you would mute your phone, please, until you're ready to talk. And if you would let us know, though, when you would like to participate, we would like to involve you as best we can.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our sponsors today. The venue and lunch sponsor, and the reason you had Mesa County's best lunch deal today is thanks to the M4 Ranch Group. Mike, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, we just totally believe in everything that went on this morning, and water is king. So that's why we tried to sponsor today. So thank you.
I appreciate that and your support. Also, our committee sponsor is Southwest Energy, as well as Home Loan and Investments. We appreciate their support as well. I don't think we have anybody from Southwest or from Home Loan. Kim says no, so I know it's true. All right. Ray Beck,
Sure.
membership chair. Is there anything you would like to tell us about membership that's going on, or about Club 20 for anybody who may not be a member yet, like for the next 5 minutes? They're just not yet a member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. If you're not a member of Club 20, please raise your hand. Don't be shy. Okay, of those that are not members of Club 20, do you understand what Club 20 is all about? So you got that memo, right? Well, I'm not going to first tell you about what Club 20 is. I want to tell you what Club 20 is not. Just to clarify, we are not an oil and gas organization, okay? We're not an environmental group. We're not a government entity, and to some of your disappointment, we're not a nightclub. Although we have been known to go out to dinner occasionally after a meeting, a long day of meetings. So now I'll get into more what Club 20 is. So we were founded or established back in 1953. We're a 501c3 organization, bipartisan group representing all of the Western Slope, and that is exactly 22 counties. We started out representing 20 counties. We're now at 22 counties. So we are very much a membership-driven organization. Our our members we put first. So it comes the members, then the policy committees, which you are a part of right now, which is the boots on the ground. This is where big decisions and resolutions and policy is drafted. Then we have our general board, and that's, like I said, 22 counties and one individual from each county who sits at that table and makes those decisions on behalf of their individual counties. And then we have an executive board, which is made up of 15 members, and our staff. The first 4 have to be in place before our staff has any work. So once we do all our jobs, they get to do their jobs. So we appreciate our staff very much. So thank you for all you do. We have 4 different levels of membership, which is individual. By the way, that's $100 a year. And that breaks down to about $8.33 a month. In reality, that's about 2 cups of Starbucks coffee. So if you give up 2 cups of Starbucks coffee, you can invest your money in Club 20 and it'll be money well spent. And the other part of that is that not only do we have the membership for individuals, we have membership for business, both large and small, and we have opportunities for cooperative levels, and there's 4 different levels in that. So you have the bronze, the silver, the gold, and the platinum. And then there's city and county. So given the time that I don't have, 5 minutes isn't much to talk about membership, and I could go on and on about that. But the fact is, if you are here and you are not a member, please see any member here, or Kimberly, Lindsay. She would be more than happy to take your money, and if she doesn't, or if she needs some help, I'll be there with her. And she is our membership development director, and I'd like to give Kimberly an opportunity to speak on behalf of membership and Club 20 as well. And we'll be done real quick here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll just run on up here because all I've been doing is running, so you won't be able to see me. I'll turn sideways and disappear. Jeff. Club 20 is a wonderful organization, and if you aren't a member, I would like to give you an example of how that can happen. Miss Joanne came in today with a checkbook and a pen and became our newest Club 20 member, Snyder Ranches. So it is that easy, and it gives you a voice so that you can speak, be heard in Denver and in Washington. So see me later or see me now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. I also want to, as part of the introductions, Marty Whitmore, my co-chair, couldn't be here, and she asked to be remembered and send her regrets. And so she looks forward to the summer meeting and likely will be chairing that one. Also, my thanks to Callie Hendrickson, the chair of the previous committee meeting, who suggested that if I sat here rather than in the middle of the U, that I could see much better and be able to accommodate and include the backbenchers. So, Christian,
Yes.
we've heard about Club 20. Club 20 has some very significant opportunities coming up. What are those?
We sure do. Thanks, Chris. It's like it was rehearsed. So we have our spring conference coming up on April 7th and 8th. And as most of you know, the 7th will be our executive committee meeting, board meeting, and then our annual awards banquet, which is always really nice. And on the 8th, we will have our program. And that focus will be on economic development, but not the traditional economic development where we poach businesses from other communities, but more on how can we educate our students so that they have jobs and they're career ready to enter the workforce and start their own businesses in our communities. We also are expecting to hear from some of our federal folks, and so depending on how the health care bill moves through, we may or may not see some of them there. And then we also are going to be talking to Cindy's excitement about hemp, which is an area that we've seen a lot of legislation and also some water legislation regarding hemp this session. So I think it'll be a really nice agenda for April 8th. And then additionally, we're flying into Washington, D.C. on May 23rd and 20th through the 25th. And we're running a sale on our DC registration fees right now. They're normally $400, and you can register now for $300. So $100 off if you register before the spring conference. So please join us. We'll be meeting with agency officials, our federal delegation, and hopping around to meet with the various folks out in DC. So please join us for that as well.
Christine, you want to confirm and clarify the dates of the DC meeting versus the days of the week that are listed on the handout?
Sure. So the dates of the DC trip are May 23rd through the 25th.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Correct.
All right.
We have actually a really generous cocktail reception on the evening of the 23rd that's being completely sponsored by Water Strategies out in DC. They're a nationwide water lobbying firm, and they've agreed to host us and provide all of the food and drink for the evening. So we'd love to be able to share that with our members.
Good. If you haven't been on that, I will offer my own perspective. The DC trip is really a tremendous trip. There's not yet on the website any detailed information of the meetings, of the activities, of the individuals, congressmen, senators, and organizations that we're meeting with, but history says that it is a very impressive array of guest speakers, of people that we have the opportunity to visit with and work with, interact with, exchange cards with, follow up with, that is well worth your time, your investment in your time. And it's a tremendous offering that Club 20 provides its members. So
And as the Senate confirms the nominations for some of these seats, our agenda will fill out more quickly. So wait for that.
Good. Thank you. I want to move on to just a quick review of some of the federal and state legislation that's out there. I don't intend to steal the thunder from any of our state or federal offices that are here to present or to summarize toward the end of the meeting, but I did want to talk a little bit about legislation. To that end, without having to talk about it, but to present resources over there on the table, the handouts, if you all have not grabbed them, or if you got up there really fast, you may not have seen that I've augmented the supply over there. As we talk water all the time, we use those terms. There is a spreadsheet that has the legislation that the River District, my employer, the Colorado River District, is following, as well as a summary sheet of what those bills are, the status of those bills, who's sponsoring those bills, and a little summary of the content and purpose excuse me, of those bills. And I would just highlight a few of those. Frankly, I would summarize the legislation introduced to date as water legislation as not particularly exciting for the most part. And nevertheless, the bills that have been introduced have been working their way through the system, many having already made it all the way through both houses and awaiting the governor's signature, including the water projects eligibility list for the Water and Power Development Authority, amendments to the 1921 Irrigation District Act that, among other districts, the local Orchard Mesa Irrigation District here in the Grand Valley had requested and advocated, and that has already successfully moved through the process. I understand, and you have a handout here, and Kirk may talk about this a little bit later in more detail, but you have some information on a yet to be introduced, but likely today or tomorrow, a House bill, the 2017 water projects. This is an authorization bill for the Water Conservation Board annual projects authorization, how the Water Conservation Board will be spending their grant and loan money. And that's significant right now in a larger context of a lack of severance tax. And for local governments that are dealing with a loss of direct distributions from severance tax, as well as a loss of or dramatic reduction in grant opportunities, that exists on the other side, 50-50. Those severance taxes divided between the Department of Local Affairs and the Department of Natural Resources. Large share of that Department of Natural Resources, half that distribution, goes to the Water Conservation Board for both operations as well as for grants and loans for local projects. We'll talk more about that process, but it is in that context that the Water Projects Bill should be read, because it has come up with some creative revenue sources to ensure that the Water Conservation Board can continue to help through grants and loans, local water project development, local water project study, watershed protection, preservation, other related activities. So please note that as well, and with some appreciation to the creativity that both the administrative and the legislative side of our state have put things together for all of us. The other bill I would highlight is a bill that the River District is House Bill 1190. This is the so-called St. Jude's bill. This is a bill the River District has been asked by a variety of constituents on the western slope, as well as a number of interests on the eastern slope, to address. This addresses a Supreme Court ruling from now 2 years ago, from 2015, that came out of a water case in the Roaring Fork Valley, about halfway between Glenwood Springs and Aspen. This was a case of changing land use, if you will. This is a case where St. Jude's Development is the new developer, the new owner and developer of the old Reece Ranch. The ditch that served the Reece Ranch and serves the St. Jude's development passed through another ranch that is now the private Roaring Fork Fishing Club. The Roaring Fork Fishing Club had improved the habitat of the ditch, not of the stream, but of the ditch, as it passed through their property. That was permissible. That was done at least with permission, if not cooperation, with the St. Jude's and the other ditch owners. But that was done and in a way that provided a private fishing amenity for the Roaring Fork Club members. The Roaring Fork Fishing Club, in order to ensure that they had water and water rights associated with that new amenity that they were offering their members, filed in the water court for a recreation, piscatorial, and aesthetic water right for their operations. And this is, again, not in the stream. This is not an in-channel recreation. This is not an in-stream flow appropriation. This is for the ditch itself, for a diversion from the stream. The Supreme Court, this went through the water court and then to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said no. Said no, that this recreation, piscatorial, and aesthetic water rights are not recognized beneficial uses under Colorado water law. The court also went on to say that the court was not willing to go where the General Assembly had not gone. So a positive statement that they didn't want to be a proactive judiciary. They weren't trying to legislate. In fact, they were being careful not to legislate. They said that this is something that the General Assembly needed to address. The concerning factor here is that we have literally across the state hundreds, nearly 1,000 water rights that include recreation, piscatorial, and aesthetic water uses that have been decreed for those purposes, among others. And so everyone with those water rights are wondering what the status of those rights, or at least those uses within their water rights are. And so this bill, among other things, addresses and affirms that your existing water right, if it's been decreed by the courts, you have a property right and you can continue to rely on that property right. Your water right is essentially grandfathered if you had that water right as of the date of the St. Jude's ruling, July 2015. It also addresses some other concerns about some public water rights. The city of Pueblo has a river walk, and they have diverted the Arkansas River in part. They have diverted it to create an amenity for their river walk, and they have a recreational water right for that river walk. And they wanted to make sure that not only was that right protected in the grandfathering, but also that future water rights, future applications of water, diversions of water for similar purposes could occur. Aspen has a diversion into an old oxbow that they've turned into a recreation course. Is that what we call it, Rachel? Is it a kayak course?
Kayak course,
yeah.
Water park.
So that water right is both protected as well as others could create the same kind of economic opportunity from under Colorado's water law. The bill does a third thing, and that is that it makes clear, maybe it's belt and suspenders, but it makes clear that nothing in the legislation is intended to compete with or alter in any way the state's exclusive right for in-stream flow, for flowing waters, for in-stream flow water rights, for the state's role in reviewing and approving of recreation in-channel diversions, and also the Colorado Parks and Wildlife existing water rights and ability to appropriate future water rights for fish hatcheries for their own purposes, for public purposes. So it essentially says that private uses of water, private diversion of water for recreation, piscatorial, fish, and aesthetics is not covered under Colorado water law. simply affirming the St. Jude's case, as well as, and thereby affirming some of the public uses that are already out there. The primary concern for everybody in Colorado is the recreation municipal contracts that are used down here in the Grand Valley to ensure that water gets, released water that it was stored in Green Mountain and Root Eye reservoirs can be shepherded, protected by the state engineer down to and through this critical habitat for the 4 ugly fish that are listed under the Endangered Species Act and their recovery. So anyway, so this is that's another bill that's out there. In DC, very quickly, things, as you heard from Christian, are still very much getting set up. We're very much in transition from one administration to another. We don't have an awful lot of the senior members there. We don't even have a full cabinet yet confirmed by the U.S. Senate, let alone the, I think it's like 1,900 officers, 4,500 presidential appointments, of which 1,450, round numbers, I'm off by a few, 1,450 are presidential appointments that have to be confirmed by the Senate. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of time that's going to require. But that is in process. I was back in DC last week and I was struck by a number of things. One is that it is still business as usual. Nothing is shut down. Nothing's waiting for all of this, for the leadership team to get into place. There's a lot of work that continues to be done. A lot of focus on infrastructure. As you've heard in the national news, President Trump has called for major infrastructure investments. The effort now is trying to figure out just what does that involve and how are we going to pay for it. From the water community standpoint, we're working very hard to make sure that water is included in that infrastructure discussion and the ultimate infrastructure investment. I listened carefully to President Trump's joint address to Congress. He mentioned infrastructure many times. He mentioned pretty much every example of infrastructure investment opportunities except for water. And that's concerning. So we want to make sure that our other leaders are doing what they can to ensure that as it goes through the Congress and as it is continued to be discussed by the administration, that water is an important part of this discussion. That maybe is enough for what I need to do. We do have our speakers here. Is there anything else anybody else wants to offer at this time, just on the broader topic of state and federal activities? We will hear from our representatives and guests from the federal offices and state offices. Commissioner Lincoln, please.
On your DC update, do you have any insight about the waters of the U.S.?
Yes, we could spend a lot of time on that. I won't. The waters of the U.S., very quickly, for those of you, those are the 5 words that have been under litigation for decades from the Clean Water Act. The question is, how far does federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act extend under the terms waters of the U.S.? How far does it include dry, intermittent streams, arroyos? Does it include ditches that have water that has been diverted? Does it include headwater tributaries that are clearly not navigable under a common sense definition of navigability, that you can't pass a boat down our tiny tributaries? But how far does that federal authority reach? There was, because this has been the subject of litigation of competing Supreme Court rulings over the decades, the Obama administration did draft and publish in the Federal Register a guideline and a definition, it was a rule, sorry, guess that's what it is, a rule on defining waters of the U.S. So those 5 words garnered about 90 pages of rule describing what waters of the U.S. includes and doesn't include. That was a very controversial rule and subject to litigation itself. President Obama just last week or early this week issued an executive order. Trump, thank you. Trump issued an executive order that directed the repeal of the waters of the U.S. rule and directed a revision and reworking publication of a new rule. So we have a new rule process that has just not yet begun but been directed. So the answer to a little bit about where we are, we don't know. What we anticipate is that we're likely to go through another long process. Right now, we are, to say where we are, and it's the individual interpretations as outlined by Justice Kennedy in the last Supreme Court ruling is the status of waters of the U.S. and the only guidance that's out there for anybody who has a permit or a project that may come under waters of the U.S. Jurisdiction. It's a case-by-case determination. Rachel Richards, yes.
Thank you. I just came back from D.C. as well with the National Association of Counties, and their legislative brief on waters of the U.S., you know, with Chris's wonderful and detailed explanation, was that we're basically back to the time of uncertainty of upon us, and that what will be required is for the Trump administration to do new scientific studies, drafting, take it out for public comment, redraft, have a final, have it adopted, and then they have to go to court to also prove that it's legally superior to the prior rule. And that is what came from the House Energy and Natural Resources staffers. And so it sounds like a 3 to 5 year process to me, where there will be that uncertainty. And again, I was unaware of this step, but it was told very clearly that they will then have to prove in court that it's legally superior to the prior rule. So that's what I heard about that one.
And that's without a challenge? That's just the normal process that they're going to have to...
They suggested that was the normal process, but
Right.
maybe it's because they're counting on challenges. I don't know. Then the one thing I wanted to ask you about, Chris, was the Bill 1190,
Yes.
which I really appreciate your handout and brief introduction. The concern I have is that it would also affect conditional water rights, and it basically grandfathers in all conditional rights, so that you could have a stream where someone could take a much older conditional water right and literally move the whole river through their private property, as long as the senior rights were satisfied down below it or above it. And so we've been a little concerned in our area that, you know, this is going to allow for a lot of people, again, with conditional water rights that who knows when they came back from, when they go to perfect them, could really move them and move a river away from public use and fishing, or most of the river, you know, in many areas. And as long as it, you know, returned back in, they would be able to do that, and the public would lose access and the amenity of the river. How do you feel this addresses that or not? Is that an unnecessary concern?
It does protect conditional water rights the same as it protects absolute water rights. Conditional water right is a water right not yet, a water use not yet perfected, not yet put to beneficial use. Conditional water right is used to save your place in line in the seniority system. It treats, because a conditional water right is a water right, because I think Club 20 and certainly the River District will always fight to maintain that a conditional water right is a valid, not secondary water right and property, and therefore property right. That if there was a problem with the conditional water right that existed as a senior water right, that problem always existed. If they have a conditional water right for the entire stream, then they have, I mean, that's always been their water right. The advantage to these kinds of water rights is that they're non-consumptive, and as you suggest, would return it to the stream. I'm also not aware of any very senior conditional water rights for recreation, piscatorial, or aesthetic purposes, because they don't have the same level of permitting, investment to put that water intended use to an actual beneficial use. That they're unlikely to have been languishing through the conditional process, through having proved themselves diligent as the conditional process requires. Certainly not for a large portion of a stream, and certainly not for all of a stream. But just as a policy matter, we wouldn't want to separate conditional water rights from absolute water rights. I have, because some legislators have asked the question about how many are out there, I have tried to figure out what level of concern that should be. And I've been able to find only a very few, and most of the conditional water rights are water rights that have actually completed in the last 2 years their work, and they're ready to put it to beneficial use. In other words, they're ready to file for an application to have that water right made absolute. But for the St. Jude's ruling, would be ready to do that, and right now are waiting for this legislation to give them direction.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about unintended consequences, and whereas we may have seen water used for ag and traditional purposes, that we may see the value of that water greater in second home real estate development as water features taken out of the public's enjoyment of rivers and things like that. So we're just concerned about unintended consequences.
There is a rather technical element of House Bill 1190 that does limit the ability to change these water rights. That may give you some comfort.
While we're on the subject of this legislation, where did 1219 originate? And what's the argument been for the benefit of agriculture and fallowing and leasing? And why is it so far out to 2034?
So the question is, this is an existing program. The program was designed, this is a pilot program to allow the state, to the Water Conservation Board, to both approve of and support other ways the leasing fallowing program. The primary purpose is to provide an alternative to buy and dry. So the idea is that if you have a leasing fallowing, and the one pilot program that's been approved is a rotating leasing and fallowing that ensures that water is, the ag water continues to be used for agricultural purposes a majority of the time, and only when it's needed and no more than a third of the time, it can be transferred to municipalities for municipal use for growing cities. But rather than having those cities go out and buy up agriculture, dry up that land, and wholesale transfer that water, make a change of water right from ag to municipal, that water's then lost forever. This is an alternative, what's being called the ATMs, or alternative transfer methods or mechanisms. The purpose for this bill is that we've had a pilot program that had a 10-year window and a maximum of 10 pilot programs. We only have one pilot program that's been approved. We have 2 more in the process. They are looking at and hoping for additional pilot programs to be able to prove the efficacy and benefit of this as an alternative to buy and dry. And so they have extended it to additional programs. The maximum number goes up to, I think, 15, and they've extended the date. They've extended it out significantly, in part because after the end of the program, there's an additional, any program that comes in, say it's a late application, under the time frame, they have at least 10, they're assured that they have at least 10 years that they can operate under the pilot program. So that's part of the reason for the significantly extended date.
How are they gonna measure partial uses?
Same way they would any kind of a change case, it's gonna be
Metering is not
a third,
exact.
the water commissioner will be in charge of that. I mean, if you've got, well, it's a third of the lands essentially. So if you have, if you put your land in, into the fallowing program, that a third of that, of your land and a third of somebody else's land and a third of the other lands, on a rotating basis, only 1/3 at any 1 year can be taken out of production and transferred to municipal use, or transferred to another use.
Measure a partial right with a partial swing.
Anything else? No? Then I have the pleasure of introducing our topic for this water committee meeting. We wanted to talk a little bit about water project development. And when I say water project development, let me take a minute and say that this is not necessarily building a dam. So if you don't have a dam project, if you're not promoting a reservoir, you still have an interest in this topic. This is any kind of a water project. If you are a new farmer and rancher, a young farmer and rancher, that you have a new operation, that you want to put water to beneficial use in some new way, you have a water project that you're advocating. And I wanted to provide all of you with the idea of both the complexity of what's involved, but also the resources, both human, agency, and financial resources that are available to you. And so we have guests from the Water and Power Development Authority. We have the chief of the finance division from the CWCB. We've already mentioned the CWCB a couple times. They'll talk more about their programs and their resources and what they offer. And then I've asked Alden, Vanden, Brink to come here from the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District, who is looking at development of a new reservoir, a fresh new reservoir, and just what kind of experience he's having in that process, both the process of permitting and where, and most importantly, where some assistance can come from, and that he's been able to start to tap. With that, I want to turn it over to Kirk Russell, Finance Chief for the Water Conservation Board, to introduce a little bit more about the Water Conservation Board and its resources with regard to water development. Thanks, Kirk. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chris. And to our host, Mr. Cleaver. My name is Kirk Russell. I'm the, as Chris mentioned, the Finance Section Chief and currently the Interim Deputy Director of CWCB. I'm glad that the conversation is on funding, because that's what I like to talk about. CWCB is made up of 5 branches. We have in-stream flow folks, we have interstate compact folks, we've got some flood control folks, and then the planning section that was instrumental in getting the water plan to the finish line December 2015. And then there's the money side of CWCB that kind of keeps everything rolling. Before I get started, I want to put a plug in for the folks at CWCB that are moving the implementation information on the water plan forward. They are doing a great job of summarizing where we are making progress, things we've got going on. If you're like me, I don't need a website name, I just Google things, and so Google this Colorado Water Plan newsletter and get on the distribution list, and I think you'll appreciate the quick hit of information that's going on there. Oh, and here's, if you do get there, this is the website it takes you to, and there's a list of the recent newsletters, this one being the most recent. I've got a couple hard copies of the March newsletter in print. I think I grabbed them before they were finalized, so they're kind of in draft form, and I probably shouldn't be handing them out, but you're welcome to a copy if you want. Okay, I want to focus on, first off, on the projects bill, the handout that you have in front of you. CWCB runs all of their requests for funding. We are a cash-funded program, and we ask the legislature every year through this projects bill what we can do with our money, and it is currently moving through the system. This is a fact sheet. It has draft on it because it is still moving through. I think it was filed yesterday, and I think it'll be introduced tomorrow, and then it'll start going through the House Ag and Senate Ag committees in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Highlights on that front page, the big number, 164 million. It's the biggest we've ever had in a projects bill. And you can see the list in general sense, some of the things that are going on, and I'm going to talk about some of them in particular, but you look through there, there's obviously some big water storage projects in this bill. There's a $90 million loan to the municipal subdistrict at Northern for the new reservoir for Windy Gap, and a $10 million request for the Rio Grande Reservoir down in the San Luis Valley. Also, you see some federal cost-sharing money, feasibility study grants, and water loss methodology training, which is 3 years worth of training municipal folks on learning better how to look for sources of water loss and billings. And then the pages that follow include all the other information related to that. But I guess I should mention the things I want to talk to you guys about. Revenues, I'm going to talk a little bit about the mention of severance tax and how reliant we are on that and how difficult that is for us with its volatility. I'm going to talk about the water plan funding as a result of the water plan. How are you going to achieve this mission of $20 billion? And so we've got some movement that we're making with some funding. And I'll talk about $25 million over 3 years and how that fits into this legislation, and then the loan guarantee fund. Okay, real quick numbers. CWCB has about $950 million in its portfolio. Most of that money is out in the market. Borrowers utilize CWCB's loan program for large and small projects, all the way down to about $100,000. Anything less than that, it might not be worth involving us in your water supply project. In contrast, Keith, following me, will talk about their program, and they're primarily focused on the treatment plant side. CWCB is more involved in the water supply side. We are able to do hydropower, which Water Power Authority does as well. And so we've invested this money very conservatively over the years, done quite well with it. I always like to remind folks, back in 2010, the General Assembly swept about $170 million. Still have an IOU in my drawer. See if it means anything. $30 million did come back a couple of years ago. And so the projects bill, as I described, has about $164 million worth of projects, both loans and grant funding. And then that $25 million water plan implementation, you'll hear a lot about that. But in addition to that water plan funding, there's about $5 million, $5 million of other money that goes into programs that is also available for applications for certain purposes. Okay, your question, hey Kirk, where is all this money coming from? Severance tax is down, where have you been hiding this? Before I answer that question, I'm going to tell you a story. So a man is getting into the shower as his wife's getting out, and she puts on a towel, and the doorbell rings. So he walks downstairs and answers the door, and it's neighbor Bob. Neighbor Bob says, "I'll give you $800 if you drop the towel." She says, "Okay." She drops the towel. He hands her $800 and leaves. Walks back upstairs, and Husband says, "Who was that?" She says, "It was neighbor Bob." "What do you want? Did he say anything about the $800 he owes me?" So, well, what we learn here is be wise when you're sharing financial information with decision makers. Okay? Those would include lawmakers and certainly the water community in my case. So, and board members. Give you a few more numbers. We're able to do about $50 million every year in new loans. We average anywhere between $40 and $60 million. Anything over $10 million has to go to the projects bill. Over the last 10 years, we've averaged about $40 million in severance tax revenue into this program. As Chris mentioned, and I'll show you a graph, the loan program gets about 25% of that. DNR, as you indicated, gets half, and we are part of DNR, so 25% of the whole pie goes to CWCB for the loans and grant portfolio. Recently, the city of Aurora repaid a loan that we made for the Prairie Waters project. It was about an $800 million project that we loaned them $70 million for, and that came back paid in full. So we're sitting on a chunk of money there. So my point here is timing is everything. Severance tax revenues have been relatively high the last 5 years, which is why a lot of these, you hear the word Tier 2 funding, that's why they've received their share of full funding over the last 5 years. So that has bolstered our program as well at the same time. Aurora's investment paid off. The water plan was completed, indicating about $20 billion in need. And now that severance tax has dropped about to 25% of normal, we have this idea of trying to keep things moving along related to the projects bill. Quick graph here. You don't have to pay attention to a lot of the numbers. I lost the bottom here, but here's the pie. So severance tax distribution comes in. Half of it goes to DOLA. Half of it goes to, half of it goes to DNR. 25% of that goes to the loan and grant program at CWCB. The other 25%, DNR distributes throughout its divisions. And you've heard the story that Tier 2 funding is near zero for for the current year, and very, very low for the next year. And I've used in explaining Tier 1 and Tier 2 to water providers, and I know there are a lot of agricultural folks. Tier 1 is a senior water right on money. Senior water right Tier 1 has to be satisfied before Tier 2 gets any money, and there hasn't been enough over the last couple of years to spill into Tier 2. So, why am I sharing this with you? I don't think I have to explain. I think there are a lot of folks that are connected to the severance tax revenue supply. The graph shows left side millions of dollars. Bottom is the years since 2000. And you can see the volatility of severance tax. Now, this is just showing 25%, because that's primarily what I deal with on the CWCB side. My point here is, and the DNR uses the same 25%, so they share these same numbers throughout. And so this is exactly what they've been dealing with as well. This line here is fully satisfying Tier 1, so that's your senior water right. Everything below that doesn't get funded. And so that's what has happened the last couple of years. Zero, very little money will flow into Tier 2 if it's below that line. So over the last 5 years, revenue has been strong, even for the loan and grant program at CWCB. Here's my chicken scratches to explain what happened to us back in 2010. I know I'm sounding a little whiny. With the transfer of $170 million to the general fund, that occurred right here when things were, the graphs were looking like this. If these were hydrographs, these would be some peak flow years. That was when we were swept about $170 million. We're in a similar time frame, and I've shown that we have about $100 million in excess of average over the last 5 years, and that's what's allowing us to share some of these funds to offset some Tier 2 programs. You can see here the math, 100 minus 25 to offset this current shortage will leave us about $75 million. We talked about the funding of the water plant and how expensive it is, that $20 billion number. We need to continue to look for ways to fund water and not rely on that volatile severance tax graph for DNR's funding. And we are continuing to look at ways to add about $100 million for water projects. That's what we see needed over the next 30 years to assist those projects to achieve that $20 billion number. Okay, our first application of some of this excess revenue, the $75 million I talked about. We're planning on doing this in a three-year cycle. So we're asking the legislature to approve $25 million, of which $10 million this year will go towards the roundtable to supplement the money that has not been flowing in from Tier 2. And the idea there is that the progress that has been made through the Basin Roundtables, their projects, bringing people together to talk about water projects, that momentum is too important to lose out. And so the board has said, let's supplement $10 million and get them fresh as we move forward. And assuming legislative approval of the bill the way it has been written today, that'll be available on July 1 to be distributed. Watershed health has been a critical issue for CWCB and an important issue to the state of Colorado and certainly to the West Slope. In the water plan, it talks about the objective to cover 80% of the locally prioritized list of rivers and streams with management plans and 80% of critical watersheds with watershed restoration plans. We are focusing $5 million of this $25 million hopefully for 3 years. We'll have to go back to the legislature for the next 2 years to do the same. But our desire is to ultimately get $15 million into that program for that critical effort. The last $10 million, and so I talk in terms of 10-5-10. The first 10 was the Water Supply Reserve funding, the Basin Roundtable money. The last one, the $5 million for watershed. To get to the $25 million, $10 million is being requested from the legislature for this list of items. And you will find those one of the last couple pages of the fact sheet, in case you don't have a chance to read through them here. We've got to focus on projects, about $5 million worth of multi-beneficial projects, including a chunk of money for surface storage, aquifer storage, and dredging projects. But our goal here is the multi-beneficial type projects. You can see the list, $1 million for conservation land use drought planning efforts, $1 million for education and outreach, $1 million for technical assistance for agriculture, $1 million for environmental and recreational type projects, and then we still need about $1 million to finish up the statewide water supply initiative, SWASI update, that should be completed by the end of 2017. How do you get access to this money? It's a little difficult because we've got to ask for this authorization, or actually appropriation by the legislature. But once we receive that, it's all systems go. Grants, we call them non-reimbursable investments. It's another term for grant. As you can imagine, we loan money out, that money comes back. These are non-reimbursable investments, but they are simply grants, and the applications will be to CWCB August 1st, 2017, and it will go in front of the CWCB's Finance Committee in September with ultimate approval in November if all of this works out as planned. Another item that is in this year's projects bill that's unique, and we've worked with the Water and Power Authority, Keith McLaughlin and his folks, on this idea of leveraging some state money. As you can imagine, we loan a lot of money to water providers within the state of Colorado. We don't have enough for everybody, and so there are some projects that have that are financed by multiple entities, and we have looked to an idea, and we're funding this at $30 million in this year's projects bill. And the idea is to homogenize pooled financing that occurs with multiple entities in a project. Many times those entities have trouble bringing money at the same time. Some have a better credit rating than others. We are looking at using this guarantee fund, using state money to guarantee and shore up maybe some weaker borrowers to get them up to a market rate. It makes the project move smoother. Money's there and guaranteed by some state funds. So that's the idea behind it. It's a $30 million fund. Okay, in summary, the $25 million in this year's projects bill, along with a bunch of other stuff, but this one's really focused on water plan implementation, the 10-5-10 supplemental funding for WSRF, the watershed and stream restoration fund, the Colorado Water Plan grants, and then the $30 million guarantee fund. And that's it for my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Keith unless there are questions.
Kirk, before I'm going to ask one question, then I'm going to ask everybody to hold their questions till all three speakers have gone. But would you just confirm that if somebody gets lost in the alphabet soup and the timing and everything else, that a call to the CWCB, where should they call if they're just trying to figure out how, if they qualify, where, if they should apply, how to apply, when to apply?
And thank you for the question. Because we were not certain that this would be acceptable to the General Assembly, we've kind of anticipated where we move from here, but it has not been officially laid out. Some of the criteria that may be required in making decisions on some of those requests probably don't exist in their final fashion yet. We'll probably have some painful activities between now and September, but the assumption is you'd be able to go to our website, again, Google CWCB or Colorado Water Conservation Board, and you'll see loans and grants listed on the left side, and you'll be able to access some information. It's called Non-Reimbursable Investment Program, which is what these all would fall under. We have that same process to access the funds.
Thank you. Keith? Oh, there you are. Thank you. Let me also tell you while Keith is coming up that if you had a question on any of the materials or resources you hear about, a call to Club 20 will also get you connected to the right place. Keith, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That looks like me. So thank you to the chair and Club 20 for inviting us over here to speak to you. It's always nice to be on this side of the state where the weather's nicer and the people are generally too. That often changes when I say I'm with the government and I'm here to help. So with that, again, I'm Keith McLaughlin with the Colorado Water Resources and Higher Development Authority. I'm with the government and I'm here to help. So what is our organization? We were set up back in 1981, and I've got more slides than I have time, so I'm going to move through them kind of quickly here. I understand that the slides will be available for members, and certainly you can follow up and give me a call with any questions or send me an email. So we've got 5 fundamental projects, and our organization is a quasi-state organization. And all that means is that, one, that we don't get our funding from the state of Colorado. We have federal funding sources under the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And 2, that we can take on debt as an enterprise of the state, which state agencies cannot do. So there's our 5 programs. The small water program I'm not going to talk about because it's up on the shelf, but I will touch base at least quickly on each of the others. So what do? Primarily what we do is fund water infrastructure projects. And as Kirk had mentioned, we're on the opposite side of the pipe as CWCB. I think we complement each other quite well in that regards. They're on the raw water side and we're on the treatment side generally. And if you have come in through our program, it's probably through one of the 2 SRF programs. That's where the vast majority of our projects are funded and the vast majority of our work is done under the 2 state revolving fund programs. You may have heard the terms Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. Those are the state revolving fund programs. And what we do is we have low interest loans and grants, so we're both on the financing side and on the funding side of water projects. We issued our first loan back in 1989 under the Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund, and currently we have our program broken up by dollar amounts into 2 categories, and we call them direct loans and leverage loans, and that's at $2.5 million.
So our small projects, and that is small for water projects certainly, are $2.5 million. What we do on those is we just issue a loan directly from the authority resources, and I'll talk more about the resources in a minute. But that gives you a certain rate and the cheapest interest rate and the least amount of requirements under the program. So the program is really geared towards all water projects, but the focus is on smaller projects. So if your project is $2.5 million, what do you get? Well, you get a water project that is funded under the State Revolving Fund program. You get generally a rate between 0 and 2%, depending on your community's MHI or median household income, and a couple of other factors. We actually tweaked that recently to try to bring more people into what we call our disadvantaged community program. On the clean water side, we can fund almost any type of project, and we can fund governmental agencies. On the drinking water side, we have more restrictions. We can't fund water rights, dams, or reservoirs, but we can fund not just governmental agencies, but private nonprofits. That's new. We got that as a legislative change a couple of years ago, so we have that ability now. Partner agencies, the Department of Local Affairs and the Water Quality Control Division. Essentially, water quality takes the technical aspects of the program, and DOLA does some outreach and some of the financial analysis under the program. Loan terms under the program for both direct and leverage loans, 30 years for wastewater, that's new to the program this year, and then 20 years for the drinking water program. Now, what if you have a larger project? And that's a little bit of a misnomer with our program. I think everybody thinks of us as going after those small projects, and certainly we probably fund about 9 out of 10 projects in that small project range. But the program is really dependent on also doing those large projects, and certainly we have the capacity right now to do so. So if you've got a project greater than $2.5 million, what we do is we pull you in together with other borrowers. That saves on cost of issuance, makes the program a little bit cheaper for you, and then we issue bonds in the marketplace, something that, state agencies don't have the ability to do. So we'll issue bonds at AAA rates and ask you to pay us back at 70% of that rate. So whatever the cheapest rate is in the market, AAA rates, we ask you to pay us back 70% of that figure. Right now, that would be about maybe 2.25%. As I mentioned, we also offer grants. So if you're a disadvantaged community, again, based on median household income, median house value, and some other factors, you can receive grants under the program. And we've changed this up a little bit, both on the funding and on the grant side. It used to be we had firm deadlines, and you could only come in 4 times a year, and then when we ran out, you'd sit around, you'd wait, and come back to us next year when we had more grant funds. So we've moved the grant funding around and our loan funds around so that essentially, if you're eligible, if you've got a project, you come see us, we'll give you the grant if you're eligible for that project. So planning money up front, that's the $10,000 planning grant. There's a 20% match requirement. And then we also have design and engineering grants that go up to $250,000, and that $250,000 doesn't require any kind of match, and it's really set up to get you through the program, through the technical aspects of the program, design and engineering work that it's required to come in through the program. One of the eligibilities that changed on our program recently within the last few years is we only have about 2 years to spend our funding source from EPA. It's done under the EPA capitalization grants. So there's a lot of projects take a lot of time at the front end, and because we can't issue those loans until those projects are ready to go, that also helps getting those grants out to give you that upfront work. So this may sound like an oxymoron, but we're actually a pretty efficient organization. My shop in particular, there's only 13 of us, and we've issued something like $2.4 billion under the program. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen, the drinking water program, we've received $320 million, and drinking water program started in 1996, first issued loans in 1997. And out of that $320 million, we've done 243 loans to date for over $570 million. On the wastewater side, we've received $338 million, and from that, we've been able to do 270 loans for $1.15 billion. So when we issue those large projects, we do it as a blend of cap grants and then a blend of bond proceeds. We put those together. That's how we get this subsidy, the 70% interest rate, as well as being able to leverage our dollars. As far as our program capacities, in 2017, we've got about $76 million on the drinking water side, and on the wastewater side, we have about $102 million, although those are estimates based on what's unknown in our funding sources. And as far as the challenges go, the funding sources is right up there to the top. I thought the picture was appropriate since we're in the wastewater business.